Join Paranormal M where mystery and the eerie come together. Subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on our newest spine-chilling stories. Brace yourself for a thrilling ride. I can't stop seeing them. I've been seeing a black mass lately. They emanate from my walls and they run out of the corner of my eye. I've been taking anti-anxiety and antidepressants since 6th grade. Recently, around 6 years later, I've been able to start dropping some of my medications. I used to these masses, whatever that might mean, when I was younger, but not a lot. I can have very many predictive dreams, some I can remember and some I can't, which always come to reality in some amount of time. My father's always told me stories about my grandmother and how she was a sensitive. I've never met her. She was terminally ill and passed when my father was 24, 16 years before my birth. She could hold any random object and tell you facts about it, and she was an overall feisty and spiritual person. Her baby picture and my own are almost identical. He says he can see his mother in me. My father has also said that he saw her out of the corner of his eye when my older sister and myself were born, 7 years apart. I've had incidents like the following. I was emptying her dishwasher and placed a drinking glass in the cabinet. Now, I'd like to state that the dishes were room temperature, so a temperature fluctuation wouldn't really make sense. I reached down to grab another and put it away, and when I put it down, the first glass exploded. It sent glass everywhere on the floor and all over me. I wasn't injured, thankfully, and my dad was in the kitchen as well and heard my scream. No one saw or heard the shatter, only me. Before I started my medication, when I was seeing the masses the first time, I woke up to see one. It was standing in front of my nightlight staring down at me. Solid black and had a wavy silhouette. I dove under the covers and I said a prayer. It's important to know my family is not religious in any way, so it was me just rambling in my mind. Last night, June 9th, 2020, I saw masses coming out of my walls. Thought I saw one walk around the other side of my room. When I see them, I'm not scared, I'm confused and anxious, but I've never felt threatened. I want to understand more, but in a safe way. Before anybody says I should go back onto my medications, I'd like to state that I can't, for personal reasons. And I have to say that those medications can absolutely give you hallucinations, not discounting ghost stuff. Not surprised that the Pentagon confirmed UFO sightings because I've seen them too. Well, I'm actually surprised that the Pentagon would admit UFO sightings. But I'm not surprised that they're out there. I've seen 2 of them so far. One time when I was out camping with my family in the north of Idaho, then the Panhandle, it's a couple of years ago. My dad and I were the last 2 people up sitting around the campfire. When he looked up at the sky and he said, "Whoa, what is that?" I looked up and I saw this yellow light zigzagging along the sky. It was far too high up to be a drone, and it was making such quick back and forth motions across the sky, it seemed impossible for a human to be able to survive traveling like that. We both watched it until it went out of our eyesight. It seemed like maybe a minute or so, and we were able to watch it traveling like that. We both couldn't figure out what it might be. Perhaps an unmanned drone, but there aren't any large cities or anything for hours. We thought maybe it was some type of secret government test or something. Maybe that's why they were flying it out in the middle of nowhere last night, but let me know in the comments if you have any other ideas. The other sightings was at the 4th of July, a few years prior in southern Washington. It was near the Idaho border. Before the fireworks show started, my friends and I noticed this purple stationary light high up in the sky. Again, way too high to be a drone. It looked kind of like a star, only purple. We thought this was strange, commented on it throughout the night, and other people around us did too. But it stayed stationary throughout the fireworks show. But once the fireworks ended, it took off very quickly in a straight line and just zipped off out of our sight. My friends who were all with me, they all witnessed this as well, and none of us could figure out what it might have been. Both times I saw the UFOs, I was with someone else who saw it too, so I know it wasn't just me. The Black Cat. This was during a time that my parents got back together. They decided all of us are going to move to a new city from a small town. And it was apparently built on a graveyard, so that came with its own experiences. I was less enthusiastic about the move as I finally made a friend, and I had a boyfriend after 13 years of practically being alone. We moved into this house that was conjoined with another. It was a spacious house with 2 living rooms, a kitchen in the middle of the conjoined houses, and 2 bedrooms on the right and 3 bedrooms on the left. It was bigger than I was used to, growing up poor with just my mother, brother, and I, as my dad was barely around. We did what we could, and we were happy in our own little home, but here we would not find that same happiness. My brother's room on the right was fairly small, but interesting to note, it was carved and vandalized with symbols. Symbols I thought it was kind of cool to be able to write on the walls. Managed to convince my dad to let me do the same, and of course my brother didn't want none of that, so we repainted his walls, and apparently this was a mistake. As soon as we repainted his walls, things started happening. At first, it was small stuff being moved around, like causing bickering between members as to who was at fault. Then the anger and the fights broke loose almost every day, which resorted to screaming. With basically every scream, something would break as if the building tension was giving it strength. Then the black cat appeared and continued to show itself, but only to me. No one else knew of its existence. Every night before I closed my bedroom door, the black cat would appear as black as the moonless night. It would come from the living room through the hallway right up to my door before it looks up to me and disappears. I have been chosen. This happens for a while. It seems like tension was gone as long as I welcomed the cat. My mom has a blue ring-neck bird. She loved this bird, and apparently silently slept outside their room. But soon the silence would be forever, as this one particular night I did not welcome the cat to my room. That very night the bird had died, his neck broken like something tried to grab it from beyond its cage. We all woke to the shock and horror to the sight of my mom's beloved bird. She cried as she went to bury it, but all I could do was stand there frozen as the whisper echoed through my mind. This is a warning. Do not disappoint us again. Since then, until the day we moved, I welcomed the black cat. This is one of many experiences I've faced during my lifetime. I wish I could say that it was all made up, silly little fiction to scare people. But the stories I share are things I've lived through, many of them with witnesses of family members and friends. A man of science. So, to protect the privacy of certain individuals, I'll have to change some names. So when I was a sophomore in high school, there was this teacher named Mr. Peterson, basically the big science teacher that everybody wanted to have as their teacher. So, right before I took his class, my brother had told me to talk to him about this, rather about his take on the paranormal. So I did, and he kind of chuckled a bit and recognized my last name and knew my brother's. He started out by simply stating that as a man of science, he doesn't believe in the paranormal because he has no metric in which to test it. But he did state that he will never say it's not real. So anyway, a few weeks go on, and one day he calls me after class and asks me, did my brother ever tell me the story? I was intrigued. I told him I'd never heard it, and he smirked and explained that when he was a child, he had an imaginary friend that he met at a nearby lake named Timus. He says he would play with him every day until one day his grandparents caught him at the lake and told him that he shouldn't be playing there. That's because that's where his grandfather's older brother died when they were children. Guess the brother's name. Thomas. Now, my teacher dismissed any concept of paranormal. His own father was named Thomas, which is how explained how he got his name. That is a strange sentence. And that he was a lonely child before his own brother was born. But then Mr. Peterson reached into his desk, pulled out a blueprint for the interior of a house. He told me 20 years ago when he first became a teacher, he had a religious student named Anna who believed that God granted her a psychic gift. Now, Mr. Peterson politely dismissed her, only got angry when she kept insisting that she was telling the truth. He had scolded her, and the next day received a call from her mother who insisted Anna was telling the truth and she wasn't crazy. Mr. Peterson explained he can't believe in that because there's no scientific proof. Well, Mother offered to prove it and invited him over to the house. She had given him the blueprint of the house and said that Anna was able to project herself throughout the house and can find things and see things. So, Peterson gave her a walkie-talkie. Sitting in her living room, he'd direct her, go to the kitchen with your mind, go here, go there, etc. To his surprise, no matter what trick he pulled, she always knew what was happening. Like he would hide a ball in different areas of the house, and well, after this, he was convinced something might be going on. So, every Friday he'd come sound or probably round, and they'd see what was what. Now, Anna had told him that there was a door located directly across from the basement door. Now, I saw the blueprint like I said, and there's no door and there's no room. Anna said she was told never to open the door, and Mr. Peterson eventually pushed her one day and said they were researchers and that if this door appears to her when she's projecting but doesn't show up in the physical world, that it's something of note. So, after a little bit of prodding, she finally opened the door. As Peterson said, there was a loud boom. The power went out in her house, and she suffered a seizure. She was hospitalized for 3 weeks. Her mother never really let her go back to school. But according to Peterson, she had taken her own life a few years later. But the crazy part was after her death, he was cleaning out the chemical closet and he found her hanging there. Excuse me. He literally ran up to get help, and when he got it, they found nothing there. Now he told me he obviously doesn't believe she had psychic abilities, but as a man of science, he couldn't find out what caused all the weirdness that happened that day. What place scared you or creeped you out so much that you had to leave? Mine was when I was in college in Maine. It was my first year of college, and it was at Sandy Point in Maine. It's a tiny town close to Bucksport, Maine. I used to go visit my parents on the weekends because I stayed in the dorms at school. So a reference to where the house was. There was this creepy little motel on a hill on the other side of the road, and you had to make a sharp right on their road and then another sharp right into their driveway. The house was really old. It was colored yellow and it had apple trees in the yard. First of all, let me say that Sandy Point was one of the creepiest towns I've ever been in. The feel was way off. Didn't matter day or night, you'd never really see anybody. I used to go out for walks at different times of the day, and I never really ever saw anyone. And I always found that odd. So, to the house. We come up the steps into the house, you immediately enter the dining room. All the floors were very old wood floors. Straight ahead was the kitchen. To the right, stairs going up from the living room, which was always freezing cold. And that was also to the right. The door to the dirt floor basement was in the kitchen. So myself, my mom, we really never liked going into the basement. Felt way off. Felt like somebody watching you the whole time. I personally never liked the living room and didn't really feel right. The only person who seemed okay with it was my dad. Okay, let's get to the ghost. At night, I would always put my clothes out for the next day all together in a chair in the room. When I would wake up the next day, they would be placed all over the house, so I had to look for everything separately. I'd hear footsteps in the hallway at night. I would hear it come up the steps and then come down the hallway past my room toward my parents' room, then back towards mine, then stop. I would usually say hello because I'm the person who's usually up super late at night anyway. Then I would hear nothing, only to have woken up in the morning to have to go on a treasure hunt for my clothes. My mom was always creeped out in that place, and what sealed the deal with me was about something going on coming from my dad. Happened a while I was at school during the week, and he's 100% somebody who was very skeptical of the paranormal. He told me he stayed home one day because he wasn't feeling well. He had stayed in bed and woke up to someone coming up the stairs outside. He heard the door open and somebody walk in. Thinking it was my mom home from work, he called out. Nothing. He heard footsteps in the dining room, and at this point he was out of bed. Called my mom's name again, nothing. Just as he came to the top of the stairs, he saw a man walk into the living room. My dad is somebody who does not mess around with anything like somebody breaking and entering. So, got his gun from their bedroom, proceeded down the stairs, telling whoever's in there that they'd better leave or they'd be shot. No one answered, so he did a sweep of the whole house, looked everywhere, all the rooms, the basement, outside, everything. There's just no one there. The man he saw, well, he only saw that he was in overalls and he had on boots. And he only says that the man's back was, visible as he entered the living room. They moved to Bangor soon after, which made me happy. I have other stories from there, but maybe another time. Sometimes investigations are hard to explain. In all my years of investigating, the experiences can be very hard to explain. It's very rare to see a full-body apparition. It is also rare to capture activity on still camera or on photos or video. The majority of the time, a haunting can be little more than sounds, feelings, and at times confusion. While investigating a location in Illinois, I asked questions like, when did this start, and has anybody been hurt? Most investigations may give some type of voice capture or peek around the corner form. On the investigation, nothing seemed to miss. I figure I would let the owner know that there was nothing here. Then everything changed. The house went silent, no HVAC sound, no ticking of a wall clock, nothing. Like a hearing test in a soundproof room. This is a very frightening feeling. I have no idea where I was, where to go, because I couldn't hear. That ended a few seconds later. Could have been hours for all I know. And there were sounds in each of the rooms, shuffling feet, hard-soled shoes walking, and when I reached a room, the sound would stop. This continued for a while, sound all around me, and nowhere at the same time. Like I felt watched, confused, and helpless. I tried to get my bearings, but I couldn't. I can hear, but not in the direction of the sounds. As soon as they began, they stopped, and I walked the entire hall with no further experience. Family told me afterwards that they'd heard whispers and footsteps, but what I encountered was well outside of something that simple. I've had similar experiences like this many times, some worse while others not quite as intense. Don't know what happened that night, but I also know that not all things can be explained. And I like how you spelled the soles of your shoes, like the soul of a person. Anyone else have any memories that couldn't be their own? I have a very clear memory, as clear as any of the others whirling around in my skull. I don't know if these memories originate from some forgotten movie I watched as a child, but this is doubtful because these memories are detailed and certain smells can trigger them. It begins as I pull up to a brownstone house, in what I believe to be in Detroit, Michigan. This is odd as I've only been to Detroit once, basically just drove through. pulled up at the house, and I go in, and it's New Year's Eve. I don't know the year, but I assume by the vehicles parked along the street to be sometime maybe in the 1930s. As I walk in, children are running around. Inside the door, I'm looking at the staircase of dark-stained wood. I smell food cooking, and somebody unseen smokes a pipe. Seems to be cherry tobacco. Nice. To my left, the vestibule is separated from the main room by a 3-piece door. There's stained glass on the door and 2 stained glass panels on each side. The door is propped open, and the living room is crowded with men and women dressed in suits and dresses. The men sit around the couch, and they stand around the room talking, smoking, and laughing occasionally. The ladies are all involved in the ins and outs of helping the host prepare for the gathering. There's a general buzz of activity going on around me. I don't know anyone, and I'm dressed more casually than all of them. I feel a little bit ashamed. That's when a voice draws my attention to the staircase where the most beautiful woman I'd ever saw comes gracefully gliding down from the upper floor. She sees me and smiles. I smile too, and that's it. There's a brief memory of walking outside into the front stoop and looking down the road for 3 blocks or so, and all of that separates this idealistic residential street with its large shade trees lining either side from a heavy industrial section with smokestacks rising up here and there. But on this particular where I lost my spot, and I'm not going to stop the recording. Smokestacks rising up here and there, but on this day, the factory set were empty. And traffic is light. That's what they wrote. I assume for the holiday. If you're from Detroit or any of this, maybe it lights a candle in your mind. I'd love to know the street name, but I believe this marked my first date with my wife. Or his wife, I guess, and this is just information that drove into my mind at the time, and it was just first developing, so I don't know. But when these memories are triggered, they feel as if they're real and fresh as any others I have. Not sure what to believe on the subject of reincarnation, but if it turns out to be true, I know where I spent one New Year's Eve many years ago. Is it possible that a house can make you obsessed with it and have a hold on you? I don't know how others can really explain this, but we feel like something about our house causes an obsession, but this house has a hold on me and my wife. I felt a draw to this house years before I bought it. Used to walk by it and just be in love with it. It was listed for sale, and it was more than I planned to spend. About $150,000 more. Oh, okay. But I bought it. It was in rough condition. It needed updating. The house was definitely haunted at the time. Noises, dogs freaked out and acted weird. Weird feelings and chills, and we had some experiences and ended up removing a mirror, having the house cleared. Got better energy-wise, and the original owner, Alice, was in love with this house, and her husband died in it. Well, in the last 4 years, I've been slowly renovating and putting over $250,000 into it. The need and desire to update and change things has been an all-out obsession. It's completely taken over my mind. My partner moved in 2.5 years ago, and ironically now also has the same unhealthy relationship with the house, wanting to continually change things and update things and every little thing. I have to pause for a split second, but if you spent $250,000 on a thing, you're going to be into it and you're going to keep making it better because you just spent $250,000 on it. Sorry. I would. We have had a lot of issues with the renovation. Always something going wrong to the point that it feels like a joke at this point. I've had major issues with every job that we've done in this house, and we've had burst pipes, insurance claims, holes in the house. We got rats at one point. We also had a fire in the yard that if we didn't catch it would have burned down the house. Dog got sick while we were here and died. Other dog has behavioral issues, and my wife had severe depression and anxiety is through the roof. What is the most intense part is that we can't think about anything else like other than this house and buying things for it in projects and to-do lists. We have no social life and don't want to leave the house. It feels like a ball and chain to me. It's completely taken over our lives and we're now miserable. I love it and hate it, and I'm frankly terrified to sell it. Something inside me keeps telling me that there's something with this house, like it has some weird hold or ownership over us. Something isn't right. Is this possible? And if it is, how do I stop it? I think since I'm grumpy and hungry, my own opinions are overtaking me during this story. My night at a historic haunted inn. That's better. In 2002, I worked for a group of companies that had a large number of fast food restaurants, like 132 of them in several states. I was hired as a project manager for a point of sales, POS upgrade project in those restaurants that included upgrading the hardware. As part of my orientation and training, I was sent to the vendor that bundled the software and hardware for training on their systems, and to meet the project team on their end. I flew from a Midwest city to Philadelphia, then had to drive to New Hope, Pennsylvania with an arrival time near midnight. The vendor was excited to have me stay at a newly remodeled historic inn in New Hope. The inn is called Logan Inn, and it's been active since maybe 1727. I made sure to tell the vendor to make sure that the inn knew that I was a late arrival, to make sure that there was somebody there to check me in. Well, I get to the inn, and it's locked up tight. Checked out the rental car for comfort, thinking that it would be my bed for the night, and after trying to relax, I decided to look for a drink to help with falling asleep. I walk into a pretty busy bar and ordered a drink. The bartender asked me how I was doing, and I lamented the fact that I was going to be sleeping in a rental car that night. Well, luck was on my side that night, as the bartender said that half the staff from the inn was in the bar. A much relieved traveler decided to have a few with the staff, and after several drinks, they escorted me to the Logan Inn and they got me settled into my room. They told me that there was only one other room occupied at the time, and it was on another floor on the opposite side of my room. This place had been remodeled, and it was basically my understanding that it was a project of a prominent tree-trimming family member, and they had no expense spared, including having period-correct furnishings. So I get settled in my room and I go to sleep. It was early in the morning, maybe 3 a.m. when I woke to a huge bang that shook my room. I then heard a lot of loud noises that sounded like they were moving furniture across the floor. Went on for a bit, and I was annoyed that they would still be doing construction while guests were staying there. I eventually dozed off. I slept in since I had a late start due to a late arrival. When I was walking down the stairs in the morning, there was a guy working on a shadow box on the wall in the stairwell. The shadow box had period-correct dolls in the room furnished with dollhouse furniture. The dolls were all contorted, and the room was in dismay with the furniture disturbed. I asked the man what he was doing, and he said he was fixing the display. He said that it was inaccessible and sealed behind glass, and that the forces necessary to disrupt it. Well, that much was mind-boggling. He also pointed out that there were nails ripped out of the stairs, and he showed me. I mentioned hearing construction during the night, and he said that there was nothing of the sort going on there. Apparently, the Logan Inn was active during the Revolutionary War, and it's got quite a reputation for being haunted. Whatever happened that night was not of this world, and I was very happy that inn had many more rooms occupied during the rest of my stay, which was uneventful. I heard a demon. It's quite huge to just assume that I heard a demon. I don't know how to explain it, but when I heard it, I just knew it was a demon. I was 5 or 6 years old, 2010, 2011, and I was in Morocco during vacation. I was visiting my family. I live in a building that my dad and his brother built. At the ground floor lives my aunt and my grandfather, and a woman with her husband and her baby. I live in the first floor, and my uncles with his wife and 2 sons live on the second floor. I was at my aunt's house, and she told me to go to my house because it was already 12 p.m. My mom should have soon finished cooking lunch. As I go up, I suddenly heard a voice calling me by my name. I automatically turn around, but no one's there. I will just wait for this. Jeez. We're at like over 30 now? Alrighty then. Where was I before that? It's already 12 p.m. My mom should be finished cooking lunch. As I go up, I heard a voice calling me by my name, and I automatically turn around, but no one's there. I got scared, not because no one was there, but because of the voice. I never heard anything similar in my life. It's not something a human could ever imitate. Maybe with technology it can now, but honestly don't even know if it's the case. It's impossible because the only technology we had was the television. When I heard it, it just somehow felt that it was not human. Still wanting to be sure, I thought that maybe it could be my cousins, even though I knew that they were playing outside. Maybe I didn't see them come inside, so I looked at the second floor and the spiral staircase, but there was no one, and also the voice clearly came from behind me. It was getting more loud and angry and close. So as I heard it, and it was just behind me, I went inside my house and locked the door. I did tell my mom right after, but she wouldn't believe me. She'd just say I dreamed and that I'm young every time I would tell her something weird happened. Those were fireworks, not guns. My grandma visited me on my birthday. This happened back in 2014. She passed away in November of that year. She was in a medically induced coma, so doctors could see what they could do while she was down under. But the doctors noticed her condition was getting worse, and she was unable to wake up. As you can imagine, it broke my heart knowing I couldn't hear her tell me that she loved me one last time. Eventually, with my family's decision, they decided to let my grandma pass, so she didn't have to suffer anymore. So the next month of December was my birthday. I'm actually born on the day before Christmas. So anyway, in my dream I encountered this little boy who seemed quite familiar. If you've ever seen the Christian or Catholic depiction of the child of Jesus, El Nino, he looked strikingly similar to him, although details are much more blurry in my dream. I didn't recognize that he looked like El Nino until after awakening. In my dream, the child told me to carry out 3 tasks, and he'll give me a gift. I can't clearly remember exactly the tasks, but they were incredibly regular everyday tasks. For some reason, I do remember that one of the tasks was to serve iced tea to the guests. After the completion of the tasks, I turned around, and right behind me was my grandma, who just smiled at me. Even in my dream, I wept at the sight of her in an instant. She smiled, didn't say a word, and walked behind a wall and was gone. It was short, sweet, but all that I needed to know how much love there was. I woke up right after that and was bawling my eyes out. My parents came in because they heard me crying, and I explained to them what happened. My mom started to cry as I explained, and I'm sure they'd try to seek answers since they were good friends with the priest at our local church. To this day, I can't really put words that fit this fateful dream, but I'll always remember that smile and the love I felt at that moment. Who was that little boy, the magic number 3, as always referenced in religion? 3 tasks I had to fulfill. The answers I will always search for. Has this happened to anyone else before? I've read that yes, people have seen their deceased loved ones, but has anybody encountered the sort of tasks I was given by someone that you've never met? I woke up to talking and realized my neighbor may be haunted. I live in an apartment, and it's only me downstairs and a person above me. Next door is the laundry room, and I've been here for 13 years. The person who moved in most recently left after 4 or 5 years. They seemed to be the one woman who was quiet enough, but had weird habits at night. When they moved in, they did so very loudly, banging and whatnot. The problem is in the bedroom at around 12 or 3 a.m. I noticed they seemed to do things at night, very early in the morning, and sometimes it was walking. Sometimes it was loud and banging. I was reminded of them moving in and assumed that they were moving furniture, and they just seemed to have this as their schedule. It was always the same time frame. Today, almost 2 months later, they moved out and the same sounds occur. I wonder about the sounds, and I hear things about residual hauntings. Not sure what it is, but one day it was loud again, and knowing the apartment should be empty, I was more afraid of a drifter staying up there. The noises continued, but it wasn't until I woke up this AM after 12, like people were just talking in there. It'd be strange for my area at that time and never hear any sounds during the day. Muffled and was coming from upstairs. Only lasted about 5 minutes. We gotta go check. Is Mommy home? I love paranormal stuff, but I'm also a skeptic. I've visited many supposedly haunted places. Some several times, and I've never seen anything with my own eyes. So this is why the only paranormal thing I've ever really experienced stands out. Just can't explain it. About a decade and a half ago, I was married with one young son. Now I have 3 kids, and I'm divorced. My then wife and I worked opposite shifts, trying to support each other through college. I'd just gotten home for the day while my now ex was leaving for work. My son was about 5, and I made him dinner and then started a bath. I let him splash around a while before I washed him down and went to grab a load of laundry from the dryer. Now, our first house was a very small ranch, with most of the rooms surrounding an almost square 5 by 5 foot hallway, living room, bath, and then 2 bedrooms. I was really close by, and I could come hear my son splashing and talking to his toys. I was bringing the laundry to the living room to fold later, and I was going to wash him up and put his pajamas on and stuff. But suddenly, I heard the splashing and noises stop, and then, "Daddy." "What's up, dude? Is Mommy home?" he called back. "No, bud, she won't be home until after your sleep in bed." "Then who was that lady that walked into your room?" I got chills, probably went white, dropped the laundry basket, ran to the central hall, and looked in at him. He sat plain-faced in the tub, staring at me curiously, just wondering who was visiting. "What are you talking about?" I asked again. He stared, like kind of matter-of-factly, and said, "A lady with brown hair just went into your room." I looked around wildly, and I saw nothing of what he described. He seemed shocked himself when I yanked him out of the tub without even washing him. But ultimately, he just wanted to know which one of my friends was over. My wife came home later to find us both sleeping on the couch that night, and I had to explain why I was so freaked out. Nothing else strange ever happened in that house again, but my son to this day claims he remembers it. I'm more apt to believe the innocence of a 5-year-old than the possible, sensationalism of a 20-year-old, but I question it, because even if I didn't see it, I was there when he did. I can't find a reason for him to lie about something like that at his age. Maybe he's lying now about remembering it, but who knows? Haunting, or am I just losing it? My family and I moved into an old farmhouse, almost 7 years ago now. 6 of us live here. The house has cornfields surrounding it for miles around, making the house pretty secluded. Anyway, a few months after moving in, the whole house's vibe changed. I started to get sleep paralysis every night. I would see the shadow man and an old pale-faced woman. She'd always run at me. Even when I closed my eyes, I could see her. That was the first, WTF, but I looked it up because I was freaked out and found out it was kind of normal when moving stress and when it arises. Okay. The first thing I experienced is when I was changing my shirt. From my room, you can see the staircase. I look over and I see the top of someone's head and a pair of eyes watching me. I saw hands resting by each side of this head thing. Thought it was one of my 6 siblings being weird, but when I went to see who it was, no one was there. If someone was there, I would have heard them go down or up the steps because the house is old and creaky. Of course, my family brushed me off when I told them about this, so I put it out of my brain. Second experience was a few months later, and, sleep paralysis was still ongoing. I stopped sleeping on my back out of fear, and I was walking up the steps, and I saw a shadow of someone standing in my room from the light coming through the window. When I turned the corner to slowly walk into my room, I looked to the wall again, and the shadow was still there. But once I enter, no one is there. Once I step out of my room again, no shadow. Third, a few months later, I'm standing in my mom's room and my sister's on the couch. My mom's room is off the living room, so she has direct view of where I was standing. I'm talking to my sister, and I feel what I felt to be like a hand going down my back, almost caressing me. I jumped and ran to the living room, creeped out. We had several closets that were already in the old home when we moved in, and these closets have little holes in them when it's closed. It feels like someone or something is constantly peeking through these holes. In this house, I've never felt alone. And anywhere in the house it always feels like being watched. My younger siblings that live there talk about their things being knocked over when nothing's touched them. Even years later and after being moved out, I never get the feeling of being watched until I stay over at my mom's again. The Haunted Beach House. I've always been interested in the paranormal, but I've never had a paranormal experience until now. My boyfriend's mom rented a beach house in Washington for a few days last summer for a family vacation. Including myself, there's a total of 8 people in a small 1-story beach house. About halfway into the trip, I was playing card games with my boyfriend and his brother in the living room. From where we were sitting, you could see into the kitchen, and to the left, a small hallway with the bathroom. A room right across from the bathroom and another room at the end of the hallway. While we were playing, I noticed a small door with a latch right above the bathroom door. I pointed this out to my boyfriend and his brother. Without saying a word, his brother moved a chair from the kitchen to the bathroom, stood up on his chair and opened the latch door. There's nothing inside, we just brushed it off as sort of an attic. The next day, we're all cleaning up when I noticed that his brother had forgotten to close the attic door and move the chair. Promptly closed the door and latched it, put the chair back in the kitchen. The final days in the house is when things sort of began to get strange. After my boyfriend and I had returned back from an evening walk on the beach, we decided to play a final game of cards in the living room. I noticed that the attic door was open a few inches. Thought that this was strange, but I figured that it must not have latched the door all the way the last time. So after that, his brother, who was also playing cards with us, said that he saw a face in the window behind where my boyfriend and I were sitting. Mind you, it's about 11 o'clock at night and pitch black outside. My boyfriend and I, a little bit nervous, looked behind us and saw nothing. His brother kept insisting that there was a face in the window, but I just brushed it off as the window distorting something in the room. After we were done playing cards, my boyfriend and I went to go to bed, and his sister came out of her bedroom, the one situated right across from the bathroom. She stopped us and asked us a question. "Do you think this place is haunted?" We asked her why she would think that. She responded that she's seen a shadowy figure in the bathroom across from her room. I hadn't noticed anything strange in the house, but I did notice my boyfriend was a little bit jumpy after she said this. We eventually went to bed and left early the next morning. Later that night, my boyfriend told me that right before his sister had told us that she had seen a shadowy figure in the bathroom, he thought he had seen a shadowy figure dart from his sister's bedroom into the bathroom. I then told him about how the attic door, which was above the bathroom, had opened without anyone touching it. The following morning, everybody who's at the beach house gave their personal stories at the beach house. While we're not certain that the beach house was indeed haunted, we all thought it was strange that my boyfriend and his sister both thought that they saw a shadowy figure. While I didn't personally notice anything strange besides the attic door, this is the closest thing I have to really a paranormal experience. My orb experience. So I watched a lot of paranormal videos on YouTube and other shit when I fall asleep. Occasionally, they will mention the topic of orbs. And this scares the fuck out of me because I know that these are real. Here's what happened. It's not really super interesting, but I can assure you that it is 100% real. I've also seen a UFO, so I know that those are real too, and this opened my eyes to silly topics such as Dogman and Bigfoot being real. That is the name of my dog. I gotta look this up. And my dog is not named after some sort of a ghost. He's named after the fact that he's a male and he's a dog. Gonna look that up later. I was in my apartment drinking a beer in my computer, and at the time I had a cat named Jamal. I ended up giving him away because he deserved a clingy cat lady, not some guy who just got a cat for fun. But I digress. Jamal started freaking the fuck out, and they made me inquire about him, and I went and tried to pet him, but he wasn't having any of that. I suddenly saw a ball of white light start to fly around, and it came close to us, then backed away, then went towards my door and just dissipated. I have no idea what the fuck it was, but it actually scared the fuck out of me. It seemed like it had intelligence, and it was like looking at us, if that makes sense. I ended up comforting Jamal and calming down, but that was a mindfuck. What was it? I did research, and ball lightning is the thing that comes closest to describing what me and Jamal had seen. Makes me laugh to describe Jamal as if he was a human, but it's true. So essentially, I saw an orb and my cat confirmed it. I was freaking the fuck out before it actually became apparent to me that something was going to happen. And no, I don't believe in ghosts, but I am open to the idea. Somebody asked me, did anything paranormal happen in the apartment? Well, yeah, actually. I'd always go run downstairs to go get my Uber Eats orders and shit, and sometimes the door would lock by itself. I fuck you not, I tried to replicate this, and it literally wouldn't budge. That lock was solid. I have zero fucking idea how that could happen. Even the guy I called from, like the apartment company that I was leasing from, joked that it was a ghost. This has happened a total of 3 times, so if that was a ghost locking my door to fuck with me, it was an asshole, because I'd have to wait an hour or two for somebody to come unlock the door for me. Weird memory from childhood of dwarf-like creatures with floppy hands running in a field. I have a memory from when I was about 5, maybe 7 years old. Keeps popping up in my head lately. I was on a road trip with my grandparents in the Midwest. This is in the U.S. This would have been around the mid-90s, but I'm positive it was before like 1998. On this road trip, we would have been traveling through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. I remember we were driving through one of these many areas that were surrounded by vast open fields. Probably farmland or something. I don't remember seeing the next row of plants that one would see when passing a farm of any kind, but it was more just a vast open field on either side of the car. Kind of a 2-lane highway, podunk, middle of nowhere vibe. Common amongst any real drive-through of the Midwest. Anyway, I look out of the car window, and there are these little dwarf-looking creatures with very big droopy hands just sprinting around the open field in circles. They have their hands hanging lazily in front of them as they ran. They're wearing blue or maybe red, as some were all blue, some were all red. But their skin showing was sort of Caucasian-esque. At the time, being like 5 or 6-ish, I thought they looked like Dopey from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They all had little caps on their heads like they wore, and they had big oversized robes and either all blue or all red from top to toe. Their huge floppy hands were sticking out of their oversized sleeves, and just like limp wrists hanging out of their robes as if they were prancing around this big field area. Nowadays, I guess I have a better comparison. They're almost a spitting image of the little minion things in the game League of Legends. Even down to the way they run, so, picture that, but if they were real. And since I'm old and don't know that game, I'm gonna go with the dwarves. But the thing I saw almost resembled something like if it was a stuffed doll that could run and prance. The floppy hands reminded me of where the wrist of a sewn-on stuffed doll and the doll hand just kind of flops around, sort of a thing. I asked my grandma, what they were, so she had sort of a cryptic tone, and she said, "They're in jail. That's why you don't want to go to jail." Or something like that, but I distinctly remember her saying those things were in a jail of some sort. What? Later on, when we got to our destination, I asked my grandma what she meant, and she couldn't remember what I was even talking about. She chalked it up to me being asleep and dreaming, but I could have sworn that I was awake during that time, and honestly couldn't remember sleeping at all during the particular trip. Neither could my grandma, but she claims it must have been a dream. I was convinced otherwise. I don't remember what proof I had for myself in that moment, but I do remember I had a feeling of, I couldn't have been sleeping because ... But I can't remember what it was. Thinking I had brought up a conversation that happened just moments before the incident, and my grandma could recall that. Her demeanor was weird, too. She immediately just said, "Oh, that was a dream. You were dreaming." Not, "You must have been dreaming," or something. It was sort of like a fact, knowing your grandma either response could have been just as genuine. But her quickness to dismiss and her demeanor seemed like she knew exactly what I was talking about, and wanted to squash any further questions. I know that demeanor. Ghost of a young girl stuck in my grandmother's house. Hi everyone. I've been exposed to a lot when it comes to paranormal activity, and me and my family are open when it comes to it because many of us have encountered the paranormal. This story is the first paranormal encounter that I can remember. I, a female of 20 years old, have experienced a very scary encounter at my grandmother's house when I was 8 years old. I shared this encounter with my cousin Philip, a 19-year-old male who was 7 years old at the time. Every summer, me and my cousin used to sleep over at her grandmother's house. She lives in a very small village in Serbia. Lives in a house that's positioned in 2 parts. Basically, 2 houses that share a yard. One of the houses has the living room, kitchen, and bathroom, and the other house has a hall and 2 big bedrooms. The house where the bedrooms are is old and just renovated a bit inside, while the other house is built by my grandpa. It was a summer night when me and my cousin were sleeping over at my grandmother's house. We both couldn't really fall asleep, and we were alone in the room, and I would have guessed that at the time, maybe 2-3 a.m. at this point. We're both kind of half asleep, and I opened my eyes again and looked toward the big closet. That was across the room. I saw a silhouette of a trailer, of a taller and skinny woman, Very different than a trailer. They had long curly hair, opening the closet and looking for something. At first, I just thought it was my mom looking for something, as my mom had long curly hair at that time. After a few seconds, I came to the realization that my mom is not at my grandmother's house. I felt a drop in my heart and I froze. I remember trying to pinch my cousin so that he would wake up, but I was so scared that I couldn't move. I watched the figure move across the room and out of the door into the hallway. The lights in the hallway were turned on, and the second the light was on, it disappeared. I remember being so scared and confused that I couldn't move from fear. I slowly drifted away and I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I remembered everything. I guess I just wrote it off as a dream or just my eyes playing tricks with me. I didn't really mention this to anyone. Kind of forgot about it until a few years ago. I would say this was 4 or 5 years ago, and my cousins and I were sitting at my grandmother's house. My grandmother was telling us all these different stories of the paranormal that she encountered. And one story to another led to my cousin Philip telling us that he saw a weird thing in my grandmother's house when he was younger. He started explaining that he saw a silhouette of a woman looking around the closet and disappearing into the light. I was honestly shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Started adding details to his story, and we soon realized that we saw the same thing. He thinks we saw it at the same night, and he said that he remembered that I was with him at that time, but he thought I was asleep and he didn't want to wake me up. My grandmother didn't seem surprised that we saw this girl. She explained to us that the family that owned the house prior had a daughter that was 19 years old. She was tall, slim, and had black, long, curvy hair. She had trouble sleepwalking and climbing up on the roof when she was sleepwalking. One of her family members in a panic woke her up by shouting. When she woke up, she lost control, fell from the roof, and unfortunately died. The grandmother told us that she would often have dreams about a girl yelling at people from the roof. These dreams occurred most when they first moved in. The grandmother didn't know about the story. She was later told about the story by a friend that she made in the village. She had never dreamt about it again after that. The ghost of a woman seen multiple times after she was murdered. My mom says that she says that we are more open to the spiritual world, as she has experienced very weird and unexplained things the same way I have. This story is one told by my grandmother. I have not encountered it myself, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the story. My grandmother lives in a small village in Serbia. There's a lot of weird things happening there. I remember her first telling me this story when I was a bit younger. We still talk about it. I get creeped out every time that we do talk about it, so here goes. About 30 years ago, when my grandmother first moved to this village, there was a murder that happened 2 streets away from her. An elderly couple that had been married for 40 years got into a big argument. The wife turned away from the husband mid-argument to go outside. He took a heavy metal pan and hit her on the back of her head. She immediately fell down, and he said he couldn't find her pulse. They claimed that he didn't want to kill her and that he just wanted to stop her from going away. He knew that if he called the police, there was no way he could get out of this. He rolled her body in a carpet, buried her under cement in the basement of their house. 2 months went by. His consciousness got the best of him. Or his conscience. He went to the police and admitted what he had done. When the police asked him why he admitted to the crime now, he said that she was haunting him. He said every morning she would stand in the kitchen as if she was alive and make him coffee and breakfast. He would try to close his eyes and open them again, but she wouldn't go away. The police, of course, said that this was his consciousness getting the best of him, but he claimed that she was there and that he wasn't crazy. He got arrested, and the police, of course, didn't pay any attention to what the man was saying about the wife's ghost. When the police went to talk to the neighbors to try to gather information and see if anybody heard or saw anything, they were left shocked. All of the neighbors swore that they saw her the past few months. One of the neighbors said that she came to buy eggs a couple of days prior, and she was last seen by another neighbor just 2 days prior going for a walk. They said hi to each other, and the neighbor swore that it was her. The police immediately got a new theory. And it was that the man had just killed his wife and went into a shock or a denial and got the timing wrong, or that he for some reason was lying. When the police finally got the body out of the cement, it was confirmed that the woman had died at least 2 months ago, confirming the husband's story. Even after the date of the murder was released, the neighbors still claimed that they had seen her, and it was not possible. After the woman's burial, her 2 sisters were coming to her house and just to retrieve some of the items that they'd claimed. They were washing the dishes and smiling to them from the window. Okay. This house is now abandoned and nobody's ever moved in after. I get creeps every time I have to go by that house and avoid it at all times. Have you guys ever randomly seen anything strange outside a stranger's house? Vague. While out walking or driving or something, have you ever seen anything strange while just passing by a stranger's house? Not like a known, rumored, supposedly haunted place, just an ordinary house that you know nothing about. Some years ago, I was with some friends. We were passing a house on the street about a block over from my house. We noticed that all the lights inside, that we could sort of see through the windows anyway, they were repeatedly flashing on and off. And not only that, but we didn't see anyone inside. I know you have to look at every normal explanation first before jumping to conclusions, and I'll admit this incident probably wasn't supernatural. And it could have been anything from bad wiring to a fuse box issue to kids playing and turning them off and on, but there's still about a 5 to 10% chance it was something else, something unseen. I sure hope not. All I know is that it freaked me out big time. I don't even remember which house it was, so I couldn't ask the owners about it or look into it if I wanted to. I've been down that block probably thousands of times since then, and I've never seen anything like that again, and it still gives me the chills. I was certainly thinking of it. Well, maybe it could be some kind of poltergeist when I saw it. The former entity returned. For about 10 years, my family of 5 rented a house that we never felt was quite right. My wife and I and our son and 2 daughters. The house shared land with a trailer park, and my kids made friends with a lot of the kids in the area. It's important for a later part of the story. Over that time, the kids would talk about some things that they experienced. They had lots of dreams that took place in the house, and mostly the dreams were frightening, but sometimes they were warnings. One morning before heading to school, my oldest son told me about a nightmare that they'd had the night before. Then when my middle woke up, she told me about the nightmare that she had the night before. After school, I told them both together that they had experienced a shared dream. They both had told me the exact same nightmare. Once my youngest had her leg pulled while sleeping, but thought that her big sister was just messing with her, until the following morning she asked her about it. Things in the house would sometimes move or shake, but almost always just on the edge of your vision, and we'd always try to explain it away. The kids would sometimes see a shadow person wearing a tall hat in the periphery, but they also insisted that there was something masquerading as a little girl. They weren't sure if it was the same entity taking multiple shapes. We bought a house in early 2021 about a half hour away from the old place and moved out. Over the next few weeks, the kids at the time were only 18, 16, and 14. Finally felt safe, and they opened to go to my wife about all the things that they had experienced there. There was a lot that they didn't talk about while we lived there, and many more details shared about some of the things I mentioned above. It was now all out in the open, and hearing all 3 of them talking about things definitely made me a believer. But now they were just spooky stories, and it was all in our past. Or so I thought. Last night, my oldest had a dream. They were talking to their sister, or my middle kid, in her current house. They were just chatting, and she told him that she had to get some homework done, so my son said goodnight and headed to their room. They closed the door, and their current room was gone, and they had found themselves in their old bedroom and were immediately uneasy as the dream turned into a nightmare. It ended when one of the current cats, that never lived at the old place, scared them in the dream by jumping out of their bedroom closet, which they'd always had sort of a hotspot back in the day for. He went to the closet door and slammed it shut. Immediately, there were 3 hard knocks on the door from the inside. He manifested a lock for the door in the dream, locked it, and woke up. It was just after midnight, and he told me about it immediately. He's visibly shaken and teary-eyed as he told me about it, but felt like better after getting it out. I got shivers as they told it, but I told myself that it could just be chalked up to residual trauma from the old house. But then this afternoon, he mentioned it was, his sister, and started talking about the old house a bit. She mentioned that she was at a Halloween bonfire a few weeks ago with friends and found out that one of her friends is very close with the family that recently moved into the old house. Either the 3rd or 4th family that's lived there since we left. That family told her at the bonfire that the family had just had a cleansing and an exorcism done of the house after the mom started seeing a shadow man in a top hat. The timing worries me. That exorcism would have happened about a month ago, and now my oldest is dreaming of the place. I know that things can latch onto you when you leave a place, but it's been almost 4 years, and there was nothing. I've asked my daughter to get the name of whomever did the work at the old house, that we may have a cleansing of our own in the future. I'm worried that if the cleansing just kicked out the old place and freed it up to find its way back to us. I have no personal experience with cleansings necessarily, only what I've seen on TV or in the movies. Is it possible, or is it just a coincidence?